question. So if anyone wants to have the recording, I can send it to you as well. Okay, shall we start by chanting Namo Tassa, please? Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay. All right. So the topic of today's discussion is the Bojjhangas, a continuation of what we have been discussing yesterday and also day before yesterday. Something that you would realize as we go along this discussion and sharing of Dhamma is the extent to which the Indriyas play a predominant role in the understanding of Dhamma, in the understanding of what the practice is, and the application of the mind in a way that it now would create the right foundations of mind, allowing for insight to bloom. And insight to bloom. So when I say bloom, I'm not just using it figuratively. I'm literally meaning bloom, as the word that we used earlier was unfold, wasn't it? Allowing vipassana or insights to unfold. So in that sort of a manner. So when we look at the Bojjhangas, can we remind ourselves what the Bojjhangas are? Can someone remind the group?
Mindfulness.
Okay. No.
Keen investigation of Dhamma. Effort.
Okay. Okay, can we go by
effort and if effort and preeti and calm, tranquility and concentration and upeka.
Right.
Or equanimity.
Equanimity. Lovely. So Sati Sambojjhanga, Dhamma Vichaya Sambojjhanga, Virya Sambojjhanga, Piti Sambojjhanga, Passaddhi Sambojjhanga, Samadhi Sambojjhanga, and Upekha Sambojjhanga. Just hold on, there are some people. All right. So these are the 7 Bojjhangas that we are referring to, right? Within the 7 Bojjhangas, we are taking or the aspect of or approaching the subject of Bojjhangas, what we are taking into account of how we are approaching the subject today, is by this conversation which arose between the heretics and the Buddha, not the Buddha, the heretics and the younger monks, right, who visited the gardens of the heretics to partake upon alms. And at the time, debate was a way that the heretics would debate was a mode by which the heretics tried to sort of become popular, right? So what they would usually be using these gardens for was to debate amongst themselves, right? And with anyone who would come into the garden. So people would usually walk into the gardens, or even monks would walk into the gardens, or other practitioners from other traditions and other schools and other teachers would walk into these gardens. And usually what would happen is they would the heretics would take them into debate, right? This was a pattern which was popular at the time as well, because it was an easy way. It says within the commentaries, it says that this was an easy manner by which the spiritual figures of the time became popular. You know, if I beat him, just like the warriors, isn't it? If I beat him in battle, I am the superior. So the spiritualists also had the same concept, where if I beat them in debate, then I am superior, right? But it is very important to understand through early Buddhist teachings that within the Buddha Dhamma, or the way that the Buddha's approach to enlightenment, Buddha's approach to enlightenment, there was no debate, right? There was no debate. And usually, people often came to meet the Buddha in hopes of debating. But the Buddha's way of disseminating the Dhamma and breaking their questions apart was so uniquely strong that there was no grounds for a debate to continue as well. So the Buddha was one who was very popular in sort of destroying debate. Right, in sort of destroying debate. And it is, I think, in certain sutras when we go through, it's also, if you try to sort of mentally go into these places where the setting might have been as explained, it is quite hilarious as well. If you could imagine yourself in these situations, it's quite hilarious as well, actually. And you see the sort of the humor of the Buddha really being displayed, right? Um, being displayed. Okay. So now let us get down to the Bojjhangas. Now, when one of or two of the questions that arose during these debates, or what was sort of assigned by the heretics to the younger monks, was which of the 7 factors of enlightenment, meaning which of the Sapta-Bojjhangas, do not work in 2 states of mind, do not work in 2 states of mind, particularly 2. Which states? One, the translation is when a mind is stuck, right? I'm looking up because I have you guys up here. Okay. I'm not waiting for someone to come down. Right. I'm looking up because you guys are up there. Right.
Wondering why you are talking to the ceiling.
Right. So I got you up there. So then what happened was, one is when a mind is stuck. The Pali word is leena. L long I N A, lean. And the other is what Sapta-Bojjhangas do not work when the mind is in a state of restlessness, right? In a state of restlessness, which is specifically uddata, not uddacha, uddata, right? Now, when we go through the early Buddhist texts and then compare the early Buddhist text to the modern, or rather the latter Buddhist text after the demise of the Buddha, the word uddata is not used. It is only within early Buddhist texts that we find the word uddata, right? Later on is where, when it came to the discussions regarding uddacha or restlessness and uddacha kukucha, where then the usage of uddacha kukucha was brought in together, which forms the 5th hindrance, right? And uddacha kukucha refers to those elements of disturbance, or those elements that create restlessness in the past, present, and future. Is that understood? I will explain how it is, right? In the past, specifically of the past and the future. Now, this is a retreat. Shiroma and the group is doing a retreat. So we are not focusing on the theory of it. We are focusing on the practice of it, right? The theory of it, we can go to on a later date when it is on a more suiting circumstance, on a more suiting circumstance, right? When it comes to the 4th hindrance, which we then refer to as uddacha kukucha, Uddacha would be translated as restlessness, where Kukucha is then translated as guilt, right? Let's focus on Uddata first, right? In Uddata, this is a state where the mental focus of the mind is hindered by excitement or trouble with regard to something which was done or not done, specifically the past. Think about your practice when you close your mind, and when certain thoughts arise in your mind, this is a reflection of the restlessness of the mind. We know this, it is simple, right? But then the restlessness, where does it arise from? Understanding that part is where the prajna comes in and the sati comes in. But the nature of the mind which creates that restlessness is also important. Why? Or else we relate to that experience of emotions, thoughts, memories, and all of this which arises in a personal manner. We can't do this, right? We can't relate to the past or the future during meditation in a personal manner, because at that time, what happens is again the reinstating of Atma. The moment that we accept whatever which is causing us restlessness, now we have said Uddata relates to the past. Any memories or thoughts arising from the past which creates a sense of restlessness, if we are to think of it or grasp it in a way that this is me, this is what I have done, this is what I could not do, then it is reinstating Atma. Now the hindrance has or is successful, or has been successful in hindering the mind from going beyond. Why? Atma. That's clear, no? Is that not clear? What is signal like lagya? Is there a problem with the signal? Is it clear?
We can hear you clearly.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Right. Then we have kukucha, which refers to a feeling of guilt with regards to something that, of course, Uddacha relates to a feeling which is considered of the future, while Kukucha refers to a feeling regarding the past. Uddacha future, Kukucha past, right? So in later Buddhist texts, Uddacha Kukucha is brought together as a fifth hindrance to cover both hindrances that would arise or create this instability of mind owing to things of the past and things of the future, right? It does not talk about the present, because then it would create confusion, right? I mean, you can understand why. Because we depend on the present moment, isn't it? Right? And we are taught in the way the Dhamma is presented in a manner where the present moment is blissful and free. Free, why? Because it is untouched by the hindrances. But if we go a little bit deeper, we know that karma, if we take what do we take? If we take 3 lines, right? If we take 3 lines traveling together, right? Through mutual conditioning, Anyamanya Pachaya, these 3 lines are the foundation of a being, an animal or any human or Brahma or Deva who has not attained. What are these 3 lines or 3 phenomena of Anyamanya Pachaya? Consciousness, Chitta, second anusaya, and third kamma, right? We assume sometimes that anusaya exists within the consciousness itself, but teachings, when we go deeper into trying to figure out how anusaya, kamma, and consciousness operate, it seems that it does not arise within, but just like a consciousness stream, anusaya too operates in a stream. How would we know this, right? This we know in this manner. When a person lives, me, you, this birth, right? And then we die. When we die and when we are reborn, dependent upon the way that we are reborn, we come to experience memory in different manner. Sometimes we remember the past, sometimes we don't. Lady Sayadaw, in his exposition, gives a suggestion on why he thinks that we can't remember the past. Whilst he speaks about devas and animals being able to remember the past more, not animals, devas and pretas, and beings within certain woeful planes who are not born of a process of fertilization going through eggs. Now, we are all coming from that sort of fertilization, isn't it? Right? We are not Upapathika, right? Lady Sayadaw says it is because of the time that we spend in the womb, because the five senses are so weak, the mind goes into a trance-like state, completely peaceful, completely overwhelmingly tranquil. And because of that experience, the consciousness is in a position of grasping and absorbing things in a much, much more effective manner, so much so that the consciousness grasps elements of that birth far more easily that it forgets the past. Why? Because the five senses are that much weak. And we are beings being born into the Kamaloka. Our main function within as a being of the Kamaloka is the fact that we enjoy the senses. Through the start of our time within the Kamaloka, which of course we all are people who would understand that we have spent so much of time here within the Kamaloka plane, we are cognitively programmed in a way, samsarically programmed, to look forward to those five sensory experiences. Because as beings who have spent a lot of time in the woeful realms, as beings who have spent a lot of time in the human realm, as beings who have spent a lot of time in the Deva realms, all three of these realms are realms that feed and live off the five senses. Right? Yeah, good. So, Lady Sayadaw then suggests this is because we are born of the Andaja that we forget, right? When we go through the teachings, we come across a position within the teachings where mindfulness, or within the Aggi Sutta, which is a really good elucidation of the Bojjhangas, the Sapta-Bojjhangas, the Buddha only relates to the first, which is Sati Sambojjhanga at the end. You can refer to the sutra later on, right? You will see that the sutra ends with the Buddha mentioning the Sati Sambojjhanga. He does not mention the Sati Sambojjhanga in the beginning. The Buddha's elucidation of the sutra, explaining this or elucidating upon the question which was asked, right, starts with the second Bojjhanga, which we know, which is Dhammavichaya Sambojjhanga. And at the end, the Buddha relates to or speaks of Sati Sambojjhanga. Today, within the sutras, we find Sati Sambojjhanga coming or having been brought up to the beginning. The commentaries explain the reason for this. The Buddha explains Sati Sambojjhanga because the entirety of the Bojjhangas depend on Sati. Right? Sati is an umbrella for the entirety of the Bojjhangas. So he brings the practice or completes the elucidation and explanation of the practice at the end by bringing the first Sambojjhanga into the conversation. Right? So we have to then understand, and it is quite surprising when we go deeper into, when we go through sutra by sutra, it's quite surprising how important the indriyas are, or the approach by which the indriyas, or the approach the indriyas take in the practice. And it becomes sort of like the foundation pillar of developing a strong practice. Even the practice of the Sapta-Bojjhanga depends on the Panchindriya. If the Panchindriyas are not fulfilled, the Sapta-Bojjhanga will not be fulfilled. You will also find that the Sapta-Bojjhangas are, in a way, repetitive of the Indriyas as well, which we will go into, right? But an important part that we must remember from yesterday's discussion is the fact that we went over the importance of, day before yesterday's discussion, we went over the importance of the Laukiya path leading to the Lokottara path, and how the Laukiya path becomes a becomes the paving force for us to enter into the Lokottara path without any trouble as we go along the practice, right? As we go along the practice, if our Laukiya attitude is not stable, and if the foundations of the Laukiya Dhammic practice is not firm, the Lokottara practice does not have a good grounding to stand on. In simple terms, Panchasīlayak nathang bhavana karanna amarui. We know this. Paspav වලින් වැළකෙන්නේ නැත්නම් කුසල්ගාමී චේතනා මූලික චිත්තසංතානයක් ගමන් පවත්වා ගන්න අමාරුයි. We cannot maintain a kusala based consciousness stream. How? Because ayonsu mansikara will always come in. Yonsu mansikara is only brought about effectively through the sila. Through the sila. Right? And then we can even go into, remember, anusaya, paryutthana, vitikama. The kilesas, remember, right? The branches of that process which the Buddha relates to, vitikama, manasa, abhibhavayana, vitikama, those kilesas are suppressed by sila. Without the behavior of a being now sort of being wholesome, it would be very difficult for a being to go into the paryutthana or even comprehend the anusaya. It is impossible, right? It is impossible. Some people would say this: there are different journeys by which people cross from the Laukika to the Lokottara. While some have Shraddha Mulika paths, others have Virya Mulika, Prajna Mulika, remember that most of these learners who have crossed over so easily, like Patachara, Angulimala, these sorts of people are people who had immense sansaric support. And their minds were certainly very, very much developed and supported. The example which is used is a cup filled to the brim, and with just a drop of water, the cup overflows. That is the example we all know, right? So we should never confuse ourselves and think or harbor the delusionary thought that just because this is said with regards to the different parts, that we can attain to this through sila, without sila. It is impossible. Because why? Uddacca, kukucca will be your closest enemy, creating that sense of restlessness, But that is not what we are going to focus on today. That is something we already know and heard of 1,000 million times, right? Let's go on to something which is much more newer, and some, of course, not to say that that is not important in any way, but something which could help us a little bit more in terms of how we could further perfect our practice, right? Within the Aggi Sutta, the Bojjhanga Sutta, Bojjhanga Sutta, the Buddha talks about, so we know, remember the two questions, how did or how does the 7 factors of enlightenment fail when it comes to a mind that is stuck? That's one. The second is, how does the 7 factors of enlightenment fail when it comes to a mind that is restless? Those are the two. Remember those two. Yeah, that is the foundation of the whole discussion today, right? The Buddha goes on to then break the Sapta-Bojjhanga into 2 effective parts, right? The one is active, the other is passive. Active and passive, right? The active are the first 3, the passive is the latter 4, right? So just to make it clear, Sati Sambojjhanga, Dhammavichaya Sambojjhanga, Viriya Sambojjhanga is active. Piti Sambojjhanga, Passaddhi Sambojjhanga, Samadhi Sambojjhanga, and Upekkha Sambojjhanga is passive. Understood? How this happens, we will go on to, right? As we mentioned earlier, the purpose for the Sati Sambojjhanga to be not elucidated by the Buddha in the beginning is because the balance between the active and the passive wholly depends on the power of one sati. This is also a reason where the Buddha says, Ekahetuka, Vihetuka Puggalas cannot attain Nibbana. Because Ekahetuka and Dvihetuka find it very difficult or almost impossible to cultivate that intense amount of sati which is required in the path of practice, not for any other reason. It is not because of a karmic burden that disturbs one from the practice. It's the fact that we are mentally unable to cultivate that strength of sati, which would then allow for Dhammavichaya and all the rest of the Sambojjhangas and even the Indriyas to arise. Okay. As we have spoken in the 5 or within the conversation of the 5 Indriyas, the sati aspect of the 5 Indriyas is what keeps everything in balance. But as a whole, as I mentioned earlier, The 5 indriyas are the underlying basic necessities or the underlying foundation or the underlying strength of the Sambojjhangas, of all the 7 Sambojjhangas. When we talk about, now let's move on to active and passive, right? Active, passive, also in after this we'll be speaking of it or relating to active and passive as activation and restraining. So passive would be restraining, right? And active would be activation, right? It will make clear, I promise. Right? The first 3, mindfulness, Dhamma, discernment, and effort, right? The definitions of what we have discussed for Indriyas apply in the same manner to the Sapta-Bojjhanga, so I'm not going to be wasting any time going over the definitions again, and I'm sure you all have all gone through them with different other teachers and Deshnas as well. So let's not waste time there, right? It applies, right? Dhamma discernment, Dhamma Vichaya Sambojjhanga is essentially prajna. But here, like for example, we did not use, or in the different talks I mentioned, we should not use wisdom when it comes to the practice, right? When we are referring to innate effort going into discerning the practice, we should not use wisdom, because wisdom gives the aspect of a nature that is stagnant. Wisdom is never stagnant. That is why we then go on to use discernment. Here we are using Dhamma Vichaya. Why? Because within this aspect, just like discernment, whatever that would arise, even with regards to restlessness, the thoughts, the memories that would arise, disturbing, hindering the development of the mind, Dhamma Vichaya Sambojjhanga allows a person to naturally, organically, almost even effortlessly break apart these hindrances that arise. That is the beauty of when Viraya Sambojjhanga and Dhamma Vichaya Sambojjhanga, when it arises together, it is almost like the effort of non-effort, which really can only be understood by a practitioner, right? The effort, think about it. When we close our eyes, think about a time where your meditation, it went well, right? When you close your eyes and something comes up, without instigation, almost in an asankharika manner, people understand what asankharika is, right? Unprompted manner, right? Almost in an unprompted manner, we are able to now get rid, or no, we can't even use the word get rid of, rather quench the fires created by the thought that has now arisen to disturb the normal flow of the practice. We all have experiences like that, I hope. I'm sure we all do, right? It almost just quenches, it cools it off without instigation. That is what we are referring to as the play of Dhamma Vichaya and Virya. Not to forget, Sati is also there, which allows us to realize that this disturbance has arisen, but in an effortless manner. In an effortless manner, right? Let's move on. It'll, we are going to go into it as we move along. Yeah. The active parts that we have gone into, or rather Sati, Dhamma Vichaya and Preeti, are the only parts that we can control. These parts effectively are the conditions for the 4 passive. What are the 4 passive? Just to remind ourselves: Piti, Passaddhi, Samadhi, and Upekha. Now, yesterday and day before, and even with my group earlier, I always tell you guys that samadhi is a state of being, right? It is not a state of doing. This is exactly what it is saying in a more official, in a more, maybe in a more, with more lucid language, right? The fact that samadhi is not something that you do, it is something that arises when the conditions for it is present. You cannot arrive at samadhi. With jhanic mastery, what we essentially then do is we are so comfortable and so intimately what would be the word to use? So intimately familiar with that state, the mechanism is almost natural, right? Now, it's like almost when we are trying to, if your children or someone at home tells, I need, let's make sambola, it is almost natural. You don't even have to think about the recipe. You just walk into the kitchen and your hands do everything. It is so familiar. We are so familiar with sambola, right? In a way that we know exactly how to do it. It is almost effortless, of course, if the coconut is already grinded, right? If the coconut is grinded, you see, it is effortless. In the same manner, our mechanisms of practice is so well attuned to a position, or to come into a position where we can just be and observe, that it arises, right? That it arises. We are going to come into it later on, so I'm not going to waste any more time. All right. Now, let's move ahead. When the active, saying that we can only work on the active aspects, right? Maintain mindfulness by letting go of distractions, applying wise attention to mental states as appropriate, and keeping effort with patience and loving kindness. As we spoke about in Abhidhamma, the state of enlightenment is a position where all the factors, or all the consciousnesses and mental factors responsible, or rather represent, the Eightfold Noble Path come into a perfect harmonious symphony almost. At that one moment of the mental stream, that is where it changes one's life. Now from Anuloma to Gotrabhu, we change the lineage of being, when not by doing, by these 8 factors now being able to arise in one consciousness. In one consciousness. These 8 states of mind within the Abhidhamma is explained as states which arise and is a part of each and every being. It is there. But the fact is, they are not nurtured. Right? They are not nurtured. When we nurture it and water it through Dhamma, Yonisamanasikara, through effort, through wisdom, now these become aspects that you can use for what is it we are trying to do. It is almost as if all of you have dressers, the women have dressers, right? The men also, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. Can't be sexist in today's time, which is being recorded. I must be inclusive, right? You have dresses, you have suits or whatnot, but you can't wear every dress. If it's a cocktail party, you must wear a cocktail dress. If it is, you can't wear every dress to every event, isn't it? You have different dresses, hence. In the same manner, Just because a mental attribute is by name associated with the Eightfold, with a part of the Eightfold Noble Path, does not mean that it is the Eightfold Noble Path. It is only when it reaches that quality that you are able to now effectively make it a part of the Eightfold Noble Path. Remember, we are not beings who were born to practice this. This is a supramundane practice. This is a foreign practice to this cycle of rebirth and death. What we were organically designed to do is to suffer, to go through the cycle of rebirth and death. That is what this is, not a part of samsara. That is why a Buddha is such a supernormal creature, right? A supernormal creature. These three active awakening factors are the same by namesake as the five faculties also elucidate in terms of the indriyas, right? Which are respectively known as mindfulness, effort, and wisdom. Effort keeps up the mindfulness, while wisdom investigates the states that arise and fall away by seeing them as the processes that are impermanent, suffering, or rather unsatisfactory, and non-self. Unsatisfactory, why? Right? Maybe actually unsatisfactory is even more of a better word than suffering, because suffering by linguistics gives us a more pessimistic angle when it comes to our meditation, right? Suffering, you know, whilst life in its entirety, is not suffering. But the thing is, every moment has a nature which is unsatisfactory, right? You know, like the Polsambola might be good, but it might not be as good as when Athamma made it. Right? Or it might not be as good as when we were able to make it in Sri Lanka with the fresh pol. You see what I mean, right? There is that sense of unsatisfactoriness. Eating Polsambola is not suffering, but it has that intrinsic nature that it hints that it could be better. That could be better part of the mind makes the experience unsatisfactory. And because it is unsatisfactory, and if one clings to that angle of unsatisfactoriness, then there is that sense of suffering, right? Then there is that sense of suffering. By way of course, the three characteristics, right? The only way that we then come out of this is through vipassana pubbhangama samatha, right? Where we are able to practice vipassana, right? And then leading on to the samatha. Remember, sometimes when we spoke about, when we did the sutra on vipassana pubbhangama samatha and vipassana suddha vipassana and all of that, we related to vipassana pubbhangama samatha in this kind of a way. Within the practice, vipassana is never connected to a jhana. There is something called vipassana samadhi, but there is nothing called a vipassana jhana. However, when we take the categorization of the chittas, there is the 89 and 121 technique of categorizing the chittas, isn't it? Right? The 81 technique is taking into account the path and fruit without the jhana. However, the 81 cross-section is not effective because when or at the time of enlightenment, a jhana always arises. This is, or this can be referred to as the first jhana or the second jhana or whatever jhana it is, but we call it vipassana samadhi. But in the arriving at the magga phala, a jhanic state arises corresponding to the level of vipassana samadhi that one has experienced. So if the person is not a jhana practitioner, the jhana which would arise for such a person would be the first jhana. That is brought about by the vipassana samadhi, right? That is one of the ways of defining vipassana pubbhangama samatha. Regardless of whether you do Shuddha Vipassana or not, you will experience jhana at the time of, or owing to the fact of practicing Vipassana and cultivating the Vipassana Samadhi. Vipassana Samadhi. While the first is the work that we put in terms of the active parts of the Sambojjhanga, this is the work that we put in to cultivate the entirety of the Sapta-Bojjhanga. Sapta-Bojjhanga. The zest is sometimes taken as active, right? This is also important. No, the zest is sometimes taken as active because we use the zest to continue the practice, isn't it? If we take, for example, the technique Goenka uses, right? Now, Goenka, 3 days, Goenka does 3 days of Anapana, which then leads on to, Goenka does 3 days of Anapana, which then leads on to Vipassana. The Anapana is to develop the Samadhi, and then it takes you on to Vipassana, and through the Vipassana, because of the way that it is done, people experience faster meditative experiences because it is not essentially on something as subtle as Anapana, but it gives people, I like to say, the chewing gum, the flavor to help people continue their practice even after they go home. Right? People feel as if they actually get somewhere, which of course they do, right? Which they might not easily feel with Anapana without giving in the months and months of effort sometimes with the busy life that they lead, right? This zest, that experience that we go through with regards to the Vedananupassana is zest. Why? I finally experience something. I can see the sensations. I can see the sensations arising and passing away. Doesn't that create a sense of happiness in your heart? It does, right? Doesn't it? Right? I mean, when we experience something, we are happy about it, isn't it? Right? Right? That zest is what keeps us going, isn't it? Right? That zest is what keeps us going. That is why, in a different way, the zest is taken as sometimes active, which then leads us to the passive, and in that angle, the passive being Passaddhi, Samadhi, and Upekka. Right? Passaddhi, Samadhi, and Upekka. The activating awakening factors arise first, of course, and then Dhamma discernment effort, zest, right? By itself is passive. Zest, when it arises by itself, is passive. Zest, when it arises with Dhamma Vichaya and Virya, now it becomes something which is active. Shiroma, is that a question?
Is this a zest like, what is the Pali word for the zest? Is it sakko or virya? Is it not
Piti.
virya?
Piti. It rapture or joy.
No, I සීල අර ඊයේ කරනකොට අර ෆෝත් ෆැක්ට් එකට zest ආවනේ අන්තිමට ෆස්ට් කැටගරි එකේ අන්තිමට zest දැම්මේ ඉන්ද්‍රිය සීලය කරනකොට නේද? ඉන්ද්‍රය බල ඉන්ද්‍රය factors කරනකොට zest ආවේ. Zest.
The book says Preeti. Textbook
Preeti,
says Preeti.
the
Preeti
Sat-Bojjhanga
by
is
Sati.
Preeti. The Sat,
So
Sat-Bojjhanga has
zest is
Preeti.
passive.
It's Preeti to the Sat-Bojjhanga.
Yeah, so it has,
The Sati, then Dhamma-Vicaya, Virya, then Preeti. Before
then
Pasad.
it has to be passive, isn't it? Because it arises as an effect of a cause.
Yes.
You can't develop Preeti.
No. You can't.
It arises because of the other three, isn't it?
Yes. That is why a zest on its own is passive, right? But that is another way that the Agitation Sutta puts it, where when it arises as a subsect of Dhamma Vichaya and Dhamma Vichaya and Virya,
Virya.
it effectively becomes something which is within that subset, right? Which can lead into a profound experience of the passive, which can be
Passive,
used, but zest on its own, if we take it as an individual Sapta-Bojjhanga, it is always passive.
Yeah.
Right? It is always passive. It is referring to, in that way, like I mentioned earlier, this is referring to the fact of now motivated by the zest that arose. Matakada Shiroma, Yam Sutrala Mema Thenama. Palevini, Vishuddhi Marge, Vimutti Marge, and also in discussions about jhana and higher states of mind, one of the ways of motivating for higher experiences is in this way, or it's voiced in this manner. Palavini dhyane metaram sapai nam, devini dhyane kochara sapa atida. Right? English is funny.
They're laughing the way you say it. The way
right. So on the grounds or the premise, this was a way that people or practitioners of the time motivated themselves, right? In terms of that zest that arises, then using that zest to go into higher states of mind. So within the sutta, within the commentaries to the sutta, it points out to the fact of how that zest can now be a figure when it arises as a supportive factor can be taken as a set, which then helps for the rest of, or to motivate or to bring about the rest of the passive to arise. But yes, in most cases, the active and the passive, when we speak about active and passive, the zest belongs within the passive. Right? Not all practitioners take zest in that way, or not all practitioners would use zest in that way, but some practitioners do. Right? Now, for example, after 1 week of meditation, if I feel this good, then what if I do meditation for the whole month? After one session of meditation, if I feel this good and this happy, what if I do it daily? Right? It is that way that they are talking about, where if zest is taken off in that manner, it now arises as a subsect of Dhamma Vichaya and me, and it doesn't talk about Sati because Sati is everywhere, right? It's in each and every Sapta-Bojjhanga. So Dhamma Vichaya and Virya as a subsect, it has the potential of now motivating deeper allowances of the passive parts, which is the Passaddhi Samadhi Upekha, right? But so it is only talking about the potential which is there. Api Israel Thava will go ahead and see.
Bante, Bante, can I ask something, Bante? I don't want to confuse. When I have learned this before, I had learned that arousing factors like what you explained, that was the Dhamma Vichaya and the Virya and the Piti, because it was a subset of that. And the calming factors were the Passati, the Samadhi, and the Upeka. And they said that the mindfulness was a neutral factor because that had an influence on everyone. So that's how I have learned it. And I was waiting to see when you were saying, because you were including the PT is a calming one, but the way I had learned it, that PT was one of the arousing because it was a subset with the Virya and the Dhamma Vichaya. But then you later on explained and said,
In most places,
yes,
PT is not considered as a calming factor. It is
yes,
considered passive.
yes, yeah, as an arousing factor, Bhante.
No,
With the Dhamma Vichaya and the Virya. Sorry?
No, you can't arouse Preeti. It has to arise.
Yeah,
Yes,
as a
yes,
cause and effect.
yes,
As a result. When it arises,
The result.
then you can use it to arouse something else.
yes, yeah.
It can be used to arise further preeti.
Yes.
Like when you're practicing and you're
Yes.
feeling preeti arising by putting more mindfulness, effort, and focus. Preeti. Maybe you can turn it into active for arousing further preeti.
Yes.
And then it goes higher to a peak, and then it starts fading away. And Sukha Ekagata remains
Yeah.
after the third jhana.
Then the Preeti becomes something that is like the effort, like no effort.
Yeah. It starts propagating. It starts
propagating
getting.
and mixing into the Chitta Santana.
Yeah.
Right? The moment that the person, the person would live abiding with this Preeti. Right? Where it gives stories about where the monks, when they walk, they have this sense of ecstasy in mind. The ecstasy that has been brought about, not because they're thinking of a certain thing, not because they are contemplating something. It is just there. Right? It is just there. Yeah. So it, as Shiroma mentioned, it can't be, we can't arouse it. It arises as a result of Dhamma Vichaya and Viri.
And Virya.
And Dhamma Vichaya and Virya, of course, Sati as well, right?
Yeah.
That is a neutral factor, right?
Yeah.
And when it does arise, we can then use it to further go into the passive states. But it does not arise. We can't sort of propagate it without nothing. It is almost as if, you buy a plant and then you cut the stem and then you propagate it, right? But you need to buy the plant. For the buying in the plant itself is Sati, Dhamma Vichaya and Virya. Yeah? Clear? Everyone else? Right? We are going to go into these later on, right? All right. Now, the restraining factors or the passive, which are tranquility, concentration, samadhi, right? And the equanimity, which emerge later as the results of the activation of the first three awakening factors. The only reason that these are referred to as restraining factors are because they are passive results of our meditation, and we can do nothing about them. We can't do anything about these things. I mean, people who try to instigate upekka, it does not happen. It's impossible, right? People thinking, there are people who sometimes think, I can go into the upekka, without having the fifth jhana, go into sort of upekka states of mind. No, you can't. It doesn't happen. It is just a folly of mind, right? Because we are not built for upekka. It is not a part of our consciousness. It's not a part of our cognitive element, right? Upekka is an element that comes about through a deep sense of letting go, concentration, and a breaking down of phenomena which comes about with Dhamma Vichaya. without which upekkha cannot arise. What are the grounds? We beings operate, mundane beings operate on spectrum. Either it is love or it is hate, one side or the other. We cannot find within that spectrum, it is very difficult to maintain upekkha. So it does not arise. We can't arouse it just like we would sort of make something or focus on something. It does not happen. It only arises as a result of the first, three, right? They are also called restraining factors because their proper and regular development prevents us from breaking the precepts and doing things which are unwholesome. When you would take something, take yourself back to a moment, right? Take yourself back to a moment. Now, let's say noble silence. Sometimes noble silence is very difficult for certain people, right? It is something which really, creates a lot of headache for people who do retreats. I'm sure Shiroma intimately knows this experience and feeling. Unfortunately, Shiroma, I also know the feeling very intimately. Unfortunately, right? Keeping people shut is very difficult. Why? Right? Why? Because the mind is restless. The mind is restless. When we think, should I talk about this? The mind would go on to, if the indriyas are not developed, the mind would automatically go on to the part of, yes, I should talk about this. Because it will always find attraction, not attraction, traction, right? T, starting the T. Attraction, it sounds like attraction, but I'm saying traction, okay? Right? Attraction to the gross. We like things that are gross. We like things that are heavy. We like things, when we say comfort food, right? Comfort food is usually oily, greasy, sweet, isn't it? Right? Comfort food, it brings us so much of happiness to eat something. So, it's not good for us at all. Comfort food, we like that aspect, right? The fact that it is not healthy comforts us even more. In that manner, we find ourselves. Why does that happen? Because the indriyas are not developed. The indriyas are not developed, right? So the restraining factors are called restraining other than being called passive because it keeps us from breaking the precepts and it restrains us from unwholesome acts that would arise habitually, that can weaken and in most cases destroy everything that we have built with the path. Everything that we have built with the path. Example, I don't think we need an example, but let's go for it, right? Now you tell yourself, okay, I've been so good, I've not eaten any sugar, right? And then you sort of eat a small piece of sugar, right? And now you can't stop. It's like that bag of chips, if you open that bag of chips, you have to finish it. It is almost like sacrilege if you leave it half finished. You have to finish it. Because akusala is like that. When you give it the taste, it will always grapple because that is your most intimate experience in samsara. That is what we grapple towards, right? That is what we grapple towards. Mindfulness then acts independently. That's why we refer to it as a neutral factor. But I don't like to use the word neutral because it has a different sense of how mindfulness would operate. So I don't like to use the word neutral, but it operates independently within affecting each and every other part of the Sapta-Bojjhanga, right? Sapta-Bojjhanga. When the restraining factors are cultivated, right? Or rather, the restraining factors are to be cultivated when the mind is restless, right? Now, this is where the practice comes in. When the mind is restless, right, the restraining factors have to be focused upon, right? The example that is given within the commentaries is just as one sprinkles water, right, wet grass or dirt on a blaze so that it dies down and is put out. Think about it. Now you would imagine, how do you cultivate it? Or how do you, this is something which is passive. How do you cultivate it, right? But think about the example. You put water, you put something that you have with you. If you don't have water, you can't put it on the flame. No? If you don't have wet grass, you can't put it on the flame. If you don't have dirt, you can't put it on the flame to put it out. We are talking about something that you have. If you don't have it, you can't use it. Let's now leave that aside. Let's think of it in another way. Think about a mind which is restless. The mind is so restless, it's running. When the mind is restless, and if you're trying to bring in, now restless is activity, isn't it? When it is an activity and you're trying to now do another thing on top of all those other things the mind is doing, it's now adding on more anxiety to the practice, or to the state, not to the practice, the state of mind that you are now trying to calm down. So now we use what? Not the active, we use the passive or the restraining factors. Just like when the mind, to a person who has practiced, to a person who knows intimately well the metta, a person who has good ability to understand and control the breath, for such kind of a person, this person can apply, when you're sort of feeling like all over the place, just calm down and you just take a deep breath in and you just let it go. It is only a person who knows what the breath can do who uses that. A person who has different other ways of calming down might go to listen to some music, might go to look at a movie, watch a movie, or something else, might do something, might drink, might smoke, might take some drugs to calm down, to relax. But to the person who knows or has some control over this practice or has some experience with this practice, what does he do? He sits, he takes a deep breath in, and he brings to heart that practice that he has been practicing. And that calms everything down, isn't it? That is what, now relate that. That is how we apply the restraining factors. Do we understand? Right? When it says cultivating, it doesn't relate to something which is new. It relates to something that you already have. Right? It relates to something that you already have. The mindfulness moderates this again. How? It moderates the activating and restraining factors, ensuring that these factors are kept in a proper balance with one another. Without that mindfulness, you will not be able to use the restraining factors to that level and power that you should be using. Without that sense of mindfulness enriched by Dhammavicaya and Virya, you won't know to what extent are you applying the Dhamma. Right? Now, for example, let's say a friend leaves you, right? It would be rather foolish of a person who is within the Dhamma to start thinking about a death, to say things like, to sort of bring to contemplation something to do with Marnanusati, right? Which is, of course, about the ultimate sense of letting go. But that is unnecessary when you have a quarrel with a friend, no? We laugh at these things, but, a lot of people do it. Why? It is difficult to understand which part of Dhamma to use, which sutra to use, which element to remind yourself. Because why? The balance has not been brought about. One has been trying to practice, but the practice is not clear. We have not polished up these angles of Indriya and Sambojjhanga. And when we do, it will arise within you. It is surprising. It is really surprising how this happens. Because it is almost organic, where you know what to do even without thinking about it or instigating it. The Dhamma, you become the Dhamma. In a way, it clearly becomes sorted out for you at that time. But thing is, through linguistics we say it becomes sorted out for you. But the thing is, that is also wrong, because you itself is a Dhamma at that moment. And it knows exactly which book, where it is in your mind, and it opens a correct book, and that is all done by the active and all balanced out by the sati between the active and the passive. Are you guys getting something out of this, or am I just like,
Yeah.
Are you actually?
Yeah, very interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, okay. Shiroma, interesting. I'm happy. All right.
Profound as well.
All right. Okay. Moving on. Mindfulness, Sati Sabbojjhanga, is the first of the 7 awakening factors of the Sapta-Bojjhanga, as well as the first of the 5 spiritual faculties, which is the Panchindriya. As an awakening factor, it is a beginning in the inner journey progressing the mind towards awakening. Without Sati, there is no start. So to whoever would even ask you, how do I start practicing the Dhamma? I think all of our answers should be just start meditating, right? Just learn how to meditate and start doing it. Rather than studying and studying and studying, just get to it. And when that happens, everything else falls in line. This discussion that I had, I want to just tell this as well, because this is something that really has inspired me. When I was living in Nimalava, in Nimalava, the monks are quite harsh and they're quite hard, not in a bad way, in a very good way. Nimalava being one of the most austeric forest monasteries there's no forest, it's desert monasteries, desert, being one of the most austeric monasteries in the world, right? And you know Nimalava, yes? No?
No.
It's in the Yala. It's on the edge of the. It's on the edge of the Yala safari, not the safari. That Yala protected field. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kashtaka hour. It's dry. It's everything that you don't want to have. Right? It's not a comfortable place at all. It's not. Right? It's not a comfortable place at all. But the practice is absolutely mind-blowing. right? The monks and even the abhitya, they are very hard. Right? But something I loved about this place is if you do something, they will blast you to the face. Even the abhitya would tell you off. No hanky panky. Huh? Right? But that is it. If you do something wrong, then and there, the Nayaka Hamdru, the other monks will tell you to the face. After you say, Am I sorry in Hansa Samavenna? That's the end. Nothing.
That's it.
After that, there is nothing.
Ah.
So for me, from every monastic experience that I have had, I would always, up to today, say Nimalava was the best. Right? Because you have no stress. Because at that moment, because they correct you and that's done and dusted. Because you can't stay in Nimalava if you don't practice. Because it is too difficult. It's hot, you can't sleep. You will only fall asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you have to get up at 6 o'clock again for dana, right? So you only have 3 or 4 hours of sleep if you manage to fall asleep early, because you will live in caves, cast a cover at the rock starts sort of putting out the heat, so you can't sleep, right? So what we often do is we get on top of rocks or something, and then we meditate, right, alone, right? And no one will fraternize with you as well. That it's not that kind of a place. They will not fraternize with you and have cups of tea with you. Leave. They will not. Right? And something that the monks, but we used to get together and discuss Dhamma. And something that the monks used to say is, because it was such a, they really look into the sutras. The Nayaka Hamdru has a very nonchalant attitude in terms of, he doesn't treat himself as a Nayaka Hamdru. He's like, do what you want. There's a Triptaka, go read, practice. If you have a problem, come to me, but don't bother me when my door is closed. That is the attitude he has. Right? He's like, don't bother me when the door is closed, because he is also meditating a lot. So it is you refer to the Tripitaka and all of that. And something that they, within Dhamma interaction, something that came out is this. When we go to get ordained, at that moment when you want to get ordained, you have a lot of energy. A lot of energy. Right? You go with, there's a hell of a lot of force that motivates you to get ordained. The monastic institutions, usually they have, of course, we have the waiting period, the training period, and all of that, right? To filter, right? And Nimalava monks are against this, right? Or certain monks, rather. Why? What they say is, when that power is strong, that is the best time to ordain them and get them to start meditating. Without that fire dying down, if they want to leave, if it doesn't work out, they can leave, right? They can leave. But at that moment, when the power is high, when your mental strength is there, that is the moment you need to get into Vipassana. Without waiting the line for years and years and months on months to be sort of deemed as a person who should be ordained, right? And that was pretty interesting, because it is true. It is rather true. Because when we come into something, and then when you spend some time in it, especially in the environment, you get used to the environment and your attitude might change sometimes. You can become lax.
Yeah.
When you have the effort, when, for example, let's say you listen to a really good Dhamma talk, or you go to a really good retreat, you must make all, and if you're inspired, you must take full use of that inspiration that arises, right? You really must, because that time you have so much of energy, and that energy is rather different compared to other energies, because that energy is now profoundly yours in a way that you're not trying. You are energetic. You're not trying to be energetic. You are energetic. It's two different things. right? When most of the time we try to be energetic. But as I said earlier, this Virya Sambojjhanga is an effortless effort. It is to create that virya that we go through Buddha-nusati, Dhamma-nusati, Sangha-nusati, and all of these anusatis, in hopes that we create the inspiration to arrive at a position where we can, but it is really difficult to arouse energy, to really understand what is effortless energy, effortless effort. Yeah, so let's go on. Right now, what is the stuck mind and the restless mind? Right, is everything clear up to what we have spoken now? Yeah. You know, this might go on, so if anyone wants to leave, you can leave and you can listen to the recording. I'll put it up. Okay, so don't feel obligated to stay. Right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. The stuck mind and the restless mind. Right, the stuck mind and the restless mind. What is a stuck mind? Leena chitta. Leena chitta. Right. First of all, we'll approach the stuck mind through the activating awakening factors. During meditation, when our mind is stuck, or rather sluggish, I want you to think about that word, right? Sluggish. The English word does not do it justice, but maybe you can understand it deeper if you think about your own practice. What is being stuck in your practice, right? When you experience as if, you know, it's really difficult for you to move on, right? Both, you know, I think stuck is a better sort of sense, but sluggish, they're trying to sort of tell you an emotion that arises. But this sluggishness is sometimes, you know, people don't really, sometimes if you've not really been on a proper retreat, it's really difficult to understand what this is meaning. And you think, you know, it's talking about that sort of sense of laziness, which it is, but really it's not just laziness, it's this sense of tiredness that you have. It's this, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's also Bante explained like it's not shining with its full power of capabilities of discernment or penetrating into the truth. Rather, it's like covered by a blanket, then it's stuck. It
Yes.
can't do its course. Is it like that? We were actually talking about that yesterday and today in the practice, where people were getting stuck and to arouse how to get out of this leenatavaya.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I think so. Because you know that you want to do it, you know the doctrine to a certain level, and you're motivated in a certain way, but there is this sort of mental block that is keeping you in the same place, stuck. It's like sometimes you want to forgive a person, but you're just stuck. You know that. Yes.
Bante, is it in Sinhala alasa bava? In Renurake Chandravimal, Renukane Chandravimal, Stiver's book on Bodhipakshika Dharma, he explained this one as alasabhava, right? When we lose the equilibrium between virya and samadhi, right? When you have more virya and less samadhi, then you have uddacha, and vice versa, you have alasakama. Will that sort of give you some sort of
I am not very sure of alasa damsiri.
Yeah.
I don't know what it I don't know what the Sinhala word means. Alasabhave, although I have heard it, I can't.
It's a laziness.
Laziness.
Okay. So
Yeah.
It's not laziness.
this is
හැංගිච්ච හිත කියලා කියනවා. සැඟවුණ හිත කියලා. මේ ධම්මජීව හාමුදුරුවෝ කියන විදිහට ඔය ලීනතාවයට සැඟවුණු හිත කියලා. You can't get its full capacity of working because it's not working 100% kind of.
Shiroma, you're talking about Leena. Right?
Leaner.
That is,
Yeah.
but here Damsiri is offering something which is actually, he used alasa.
Yeah.
And sluggishness, the Pali is sloth and torpor.
Yeah, sloth and torpor is sluggishness.
Yes, but hangichabave is leenatave.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
but I don't know. I mean, hangichabave, the thing is, hangichabave with the little Sinhala that I can understand. I mean, that hidden aspect, isn't it? But thing is, more than hidden, I feel like this is more of like a blockade almost.
Yeah, it's like covered. It's like covered by a blanket and it's not performing.
Okay.
As it should do.
Yes,
Kind of.
as it should do. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
In other words, inhibiting.
Yeah, inhibiting.
Yeah.
Yes, inhibiting.
That's the word.
Yeah. And when we talk about this sense of the stuck mind, or the being stuck, this sense of, then it gives us, they use the word sluggishness, right? The Pali, this is essentially the mind becoming overcome by Peenamidda, right? Sloth and torpor, right? When sloth and torpor arises, the awakening factor or the passive awakening factors should not be applied. What should be applied is the three awakening factors, the triad of, the triad of the activating factors should now be applied. Right? To activate, now you understand why they use the word activating. To activate the kusala, to get the chakra moving again, to get the dhamma chakra, right, moving again, rolling again, to get that rust off the wheel, the mechanisms which is preventing this wheel from rolling. You apply the dhamma vichaya effort, and here zest. This is how the zest comes in. Because why, Shiroma?
That's right.
Why? Because zest won't come without the zest, especially when we have the stuck emotion of the mind or the stuck aspect of the mind. You can't motivate yourself to now overcome that stuckness if you don't have a flavor of what this path can give you. Why should I make the effort? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We make the effort because we have a taste of what it could feel like. Zest. That is why in the Aggi Sutra, the Buddha, within the commentary, the Buddha as well talks about the zest which can or has the potential of playing a passive role when it is accompanied by not anything else but the Dhamma Vichaya and Virya. Right? Dhamma Vichaya and Virya. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And clearly, the Dhamma Vichaya is then sort of Dhamma Vichaya and the activating factors are then applied to get things rolling, right? To free this stuck mind, right? We begin with the activating factors, that is Dhamma Vichaya, right? Dhamma Vichaya and so on, right? We should examine truly what is going on. cultivating a sense of awareness into what is the issue at hand. This, through the basic states of meditation, this is something that we train to do. But this becomes vital as we truly develop what, this is the last 5 minutes of our Saturday and Sunday sessions, the reminiscing, the reviewing of the practice. We are with the reviewing training, what we are effectively trying to do is we review what, not what we think is going on, what went on. There's a big difference, let me tell you. Because your mind, it is really, our minds are very good at drawing up scripts. It will tell you things that it thinks is happening, which can be no more farther away from what is actually happening. We train ourselves. That is why we don't use the word wisdom. That is why we use words like discernment and Dhammavichaya, because it is really giving you the skill and ability to put aside what you think is right or wrong, or what went on or what didn't go on, and you start looking at what is actually happening without judgment. The Dhammavichaya learns in such a manner that you don't even have to now tell yourself, this is the takeaways. It will take away what should be taken away. It will take away what should be taken away. Just like a person who is enlightened knows that he has reached the peerless state of enlightenment. Just like a person who has entered the jhanic states know that he has entered the jhanic states. Similarly, this person who is within the practice knows for sure that this is what is to be taken. And that is what we try to cultivate through these, right? Awareness of what is troubling us, right? And this is very similar to Bahaya's teaching, remember, right? To Bahaya's teaching, if we remember the story of Bahaya, this is exactly Bahaya's teaching, right? Exactly Bahaya's teaching, which is this ability. Hold on, I just lost you guys. Which is this ability to see what is actually going on, right? Regarding the sense experiences as we see them objectively, right? Objectively. This way, we will filter away the conditions. We will know for sure what are the conditions that arose, right? What are the conditions that arose? Sorry. What are the conditions that have been conditioning our thought patterns? We can filter those stuff away to realize, these are the conditions. These are the kilesas. These are the hindrances. These are the thoughts fueled by the hindrances. And this is what it truly is. And at this stage, there are no stories, remember. There is no, my husband did this to me, my daughter did this to me. Nothing of that nonsense is here. If that is there, know for yourself, that is the condition. Don't look at that. To hell with that. What you are looking at is the attachment to that. What you're looking at is the phenomena underlying the kilesas, the hindrances, which is propagating the attachment, which will not allow us to let go of this. Right? Carl Jung, right? This celebrated philosopher he looks at this and he talks about Buddhism in such a profound manner. He says, if we look, he realizes the fact, if we realize these parts of Dhamma, he talks about Buddhism so strongly. He says, this is the key to end mass psychosis in the world. Realizing the difference between condition and reality. This is just beautiful. As a 27-year-old Catholic boy, right? I feel so privileged to know these things through the Dhamma. Look at this, isn't it? Look at this. It is really that sort of, it's giving us the intricacies of what is ruining our lives, right? What is keeping us from that fullest potential of coming into that liberated sense of living, which is that part of separating ourselves from the condition. The condition should be put away in our practice. It doesn't matter. So for those who are fighting with the thoughts again and again and again, our instigation should be to get rid of that. Don't focus on that. Focus on the conditions and reality. That is what then Dhamma Vichaya does for you. This Dhamma Vichaya, if we take through Bahiya teachings, which I know that all of you know, right? When these sense experiences are looked at objectively, this will filter away the conditions that have choked up the mind. And although we speak about now effort being put in, remember this effort comes through affection, or it's rather not affection. I'm sorry, that's the wrong word. It's affective. Meaning it comes from the being rather than implied effort. Rather than implied effort. Just think about this, right? Just the thought of, just imagine the Buddha being in front of you right now. You will, without even thinking, fall on your knees with adoration and respect. Affective, not instigated, not prompted. This comes from inside. That is why then it comes through practitioners have to nourish and nurture their lives. You have to water the plant of Dhamma within you. That is where this affective effort arises. As an Indriya, that is what we do. That is when it becomes this power, which then, through this affective engagement with Dhamma Vichaya, when this affective effort arises, this is the beginning of renunciation. By renunciation, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about the ability of letting go. I'm talking about the ability of letting go. That letting go is not pure. Letting go on the premise that something is just impermanent is superficial. Letting go on the premise of, for example, that the Buddha said so, it is superficial. Letting go on the premise that you are some way down the line going to get hurt is superficial. That is not what we are trying to do here. The letting go aspect is a nurtured result. Result of what? Sati, Dhamma Vichaya, Virya, and sometimes zest. Is that clear? It's beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful.
Don't fool yourself. This is not me. I'm just relating the Dhamma, okay? So, so while I'm also talking to you, I'm also talking to myself, you see. Right? Yes, Shiroma.
To clarify it a little bit more with the practice itself. So the teachings to Bar here. Now we kind of practice that with the Indriya Bhavana at the sense-based levels, and that letting go happens at the contact level. Seeing the causes, letting go, so that the condition, you see the reality and the conditioned part, and we can, I mean, lot of some of them. This is what we were discussing at 3 o'clock today, and we did this Indriya meditation for 1.5 hours today, and then we discussed it at 3 o'clock. So some had kind of profound experiences where they experienced a block where the contact happened, and it automatically, without effort, just by seeing that it kind of felt like a block and didn't go to the subsequent conditioned parts. So there was like a letting go and going from one sense base to the other, letting go from one and then feeling the complete upeka inside as a passive Bojjhanga. I don't know whether it's called a Bojjhanga, but upeka inside. So it's that kind of, because what we used was the 3 active Bojjhangas, the 3 active parts, Dhammavijaya, Virya, and of course the mindfulness. That's all that was used. And then I think in the part as this practice builds on, the Priti, Sukha, then from inside arises as you're letting go. There's the pasadi, the feeling of nivima inside and emptiness inside, because there's no clutter inside. There's nothing happening inside anymore. Yeah. There's no Vedana, Sanya, Sankara part. It's not there. It just is at the contact level.
Yes.
Is that something that you were referring to here, isn't it?
Yes.
Priti arises as well there.
I think the experience that you're talking about, the experience that you're talking about is very much in line. And with regard to Bahiya's teaching, the main takeaway of that teaching is the element of being able to objectively view with Dhammavichaya. Objectively view with Dhammavichaya, supported by Virya, in a way that we are able to not pay any attention to the agantuka arammana that arises within the mind, the Dhammavichaya being established or propagated within the mind. There is only viewing, there is no holding. Hence, the meditator who continues on Indriya Bhavana, or as what has been mentioned to Bahiya, he does not hold or feels a sense of lightness pervading all throughout his existence, because nothing is held. Dhammavichaya is the predominant fact, and everything which arises, because Dhammavichaya is there, now supported by the 3, nothing has value. Nothing has a sense of weight. Nothing has a sense of importance. It just flow. It's difficult to say what it just is.
What you feel is kind of emptiness. What is felt in these meditations, where the ones who do successfully, is a kind of the rest of the pasadi, the tranquility, the nivima, and then the emptiness, and a kind of non-judgmental watching, because they are causally starts, and then the effect passes away, the cause passes away, the effect passes away, and therefore seeing that there is no further hooking on for the rest of the panchaskandhas to form and create this the illusion or the conditioned part of it. So you see the causes, the 3 causes arising, and seeing, hearing, the feeling, sutta mutta vinyata occurring and passing.
The example,
passing. So there is
the example which is given is something like this, and I think it's a beautiful example. which is, imagine a state of, imagine being witness or witnessing. You're on top of a mountain, a beautiful, serene, something like Dill's background, you see.
His background.
So, something like this, something like this background.
Not like Dil, but the background.
Right. Something like, you're on top of a mountain, and you're on top of a mountain, on top of a rock, or somewhere beautiful. And you sit yourself down and you're sort of gazing out, right? We have these experiences, right? We've all been to beautiful places, right? The view on its own is something which is so profoundly calming, right? If you take yourself back to that moment that you have individually experienced that state, you look at the view, you've settled yourself down, you sat down, or you're relaxed, and you just gaze out. This is not, think of it, between the time that you're completely, before you move around to see the rest, right? To sort of view the rest of the scenery, you gaze, and there is this moment of completely, profoundly being satisfied. It's not in a tanha way, it's just like you're relaxed, the mind is calm and empty, there's something in front of you, and that the way that it observed or is observed itself is something so profoundly calming. There is no, at one moment, you don't even need to look around, just that side that the face is turned towards and the eyes see is enough. That state is compared to this experience. Where you have, can you think about what I'm trying to say? Where, this state of complete, it's so beautiful, but there is no attachment whatsoever. You've just set your eyes upon this scenery. You don't even need to move. There is that moment where before that thought arises, I should move around to see. Before that thought arises, there is this moment where you're completely at peace. It's like that moment. Is that a question, Shirama?
Yes. Bante, when you see a scenery like that, its natural tendency to you cling on to that one, then you break the law, right? As soon as you cling on to that scenery, then you have attachment. How can we actually stop at that point without clinging onto that scenery?
I think okay. I think yes, by law, the usual way the mind would operate is that. And I don't think at that point you can do much to get rid of that clinging.
Yes.
Is to really train your mind. I mean, yes, of course, we say, and I have myself said, and all of that, but we all know that doesn't work. We all know that doesn't work, so let's cut the nonsense, right? But what is really to be done is train ourselves, which is possible, which is to train ourselves through the practice. Because remember that moment that I have just explained. For that split second of a moment, you're completely at peace. There is no attachment. It is when now the Uddacha Kukkucha comes in, or rather the restlessness of mind comes in, now you want to look around, and now the clinging, the craving, all of that attaches. That shows you two sides that the mind can go to. That shows you potential. There's potential to be at peace. There's potential to create restlessness. And I think with or during the time of sitting, whilst you're in meditation, that is where we can develop the skill to truly observe without the clinging. And I
Yeah.
don't think, honestly, Dhammasari, I really don't think the instigation of anicca dukkha anatma upon a scenery, upon a person does work, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you do not have that sitting practice, I don't think it has. I don't think it works, especially for beings like us.
Yeah.
Shiroma, do you have a thought about that?
I was thinking while that discussion was going, in a practical sense, like you actually equated that to the experience of the Indriya Bhavana at the contact level, and where you go and the mind falls into a state. And then this you brought in this example to compare, to say that that feeling is just like the feeling that you described while watching the scenery,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So taking it further from there, when you're doing the meditation at the sense base levels, at the contact level, and you're letting go there, it's at the contact level. So it hasn't actually come to a state where your judgment has come, whether it is good or bad or nice or not nice, or I like it or I don't like it, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. uh, that part hasn't come because you let go at that part. This is actually very deep meditations,
Yeah.
but you are those who can do, they kind of let go, and then the attention has gone to the next sense base. So in fact, you need to first the judgment arise, that's beautiful, I like it, and then the attachment starts to come. But here you're watching something so perfect because there is no liking, there is no dislike, because there is no good or bad about it. It is just what it is. So it is just being one with this one of my, she was explaining that it is because it is just,
You are in it, like one with the universe.
it
or
is,
you are in
yeah,
it.
it is what it is, kind of. It is what it is. There is no, it is so perfect because you are not judging it, whether it is good or bad, or whether it can be better, or so there is no unsatisfactoriness there, because there are no expectations to what that arose and it passed at the contact level. So if you miss that, the very next deduction moment, you have started to judge it, you have put all your preconceived ideas into it, and then the namakarana come, and then you named it, oh, pretty beautiful thing, and all your data that you have stored come to identify that picture with something that you've already put from before.
Mm.
So this is so pure, and so pure is the word. What you experience is so pure. There's no judgments there. So maybe the kilesas don't arise at that moment. So there is no attachment to it. It is just an observation, perfect in itself. That's
Ante, can I add something to it to what Shiroma said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There's a story that Buddha was at a hilltop and there was a beautiful sunset. He enjoyed the sunset and he called Ananda, Arhat Ananda, said, look, it's a beautiful inset. Enjoy the sunset, see how beautiful it is. And then there's another story. After he became the Buddha, some musicians came and played music. And he really enjoyed the music and thanked the musician for playing that instrument. So only thing, you can enjoy things in life, but don't get attached. Even with children, do enjoy the children, but let them go free. Don't get attached to it. That's what I have heard from, I have read and what I heard. It's not a case of judging. You can say it's a beautiful sunset. You can enjoy it, but don't get too much attached to it. You can enjoy music, but don't get attached to it. Buddha did the same thing after he became, attained the Buddhahood.
Yeah, the answer to that comes to my mind is in the Buddha's mind, Lobha, Moha, Dvesha are completely eradicated. It's not the case in ours. In a split second, we enjoy something, Lobha, Moha, Dvesha arise, and then you're hooked onto it, and enjoyment, attachment, or aversion arise. We can't stop it. So in the Indriya Bhavana, we do it as a special technique, special Bhavana as a practice, because our Lobha, Moha, Dvesha to certain levels are still there. They are going down, but they're still there, and you can always say when you enjoy it, you can't stop but get attached, as Dhammasiri said, because Lobha, Moha, Dvesha, Anusaya Keles is still there. This is only a process of eliminating those Anusaya Keles. So we can only watch and let go, do this million times until slowly but surely the Lobha, Moha, Dveshas get eradicated. Once it's eradicated, we can enjoy and do everything and yet be free from suffering, free from kilesas. So that's my understanding, how I understand. So it's a case of practice, you see.
Bhante, can I say something? I remember that story with the Buddha. Then at that time, Ananda wasn't an arahant because Buddha was alive. And Ananda and Buddha was there, and Ananda was really enraptured by this sunset. And he said, look at this beautiful sunset. And then the Buddha said, see, you have seen it and you said it's beautiful and you got attracted to it. For me, I saw the sunset and he let it be at that. And the story that the experience your friend had, I don't, is that Malkanti, the lady next to you, the lady who spoke about experience? Anyway, what
I
was
don't think we
this
should.
lady?
Shall I
No,
say?
no,
They,
so,
I
no,
don't think.
no,
I think it's a bit personal.
no, so okay. So what I wanted to say was that experience. No, I don't want to ask the name because I didn't want to address as your colleague. But it's not that I wanted the name. What the experience is said. What I've seen that when you become, what I've experienced is you not only become that moment before you like it and you become one with the objects. That's what I wanted to ask
Yes,
her.
that's what she was
That's
saying.
what, yeah, that's what I was. That's what happens. Suddenly there is no distance between you and the object. You are just one, and there's just pure awareness. It goes. I can't. There's a vibrancy and awareness, but suddenly, see, you're looking at a fly, and you keep looking at it, and suddenly the thing disappears, and you're just one with the object. That's what I wanted to ask her, whether that
Yes.
was the experience.
Yes, that's right. So to put a little bit of Dhamma into it, that the space, and because that actually there, what happens is at that level, what is actually happening is just the process happening. And there is the process happening, and suddenly the object and the subject is not not, you can't say they're completely not there. It depends on the depth of this experience. But it's a matter of like there is no subject there, so there's no object. In reality, it's like a cause and effect phenomena for that split titakshana moment. And that was it. So it is a process than anything. So the I part of it doesn't arise or gets delayed to arise, and that split second of delay is there for you to move to the next ayatana. This is our practice level because we haven't mastered it yet. We are all finding our way and practicing and discussing and with all our teachers. And so, yes, ultimately, I suppose if you mastered it, there won't be time and space there because it's just a process. So the object and subject and the process becomes one. The seer seen and the process of becomes just the process.
Thank you. That's what.
So it's not, we are not saying there, but I think that is what it leads to.
Thank you.
Eventually.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to ask. Sorry.
Bhante, I like to raise this question actually. Can you really stop the process of thought process at the level of passa? As soon as you pass the stage of tikshakshan of passa, you inevitably go into Vedana. So Vedana is the place where you really see whether it is favorable object or unfavorable object. likely object or repulsive object. So I have a very difficult situation to understand stopping at the passa stage in your thought process, um, because you inevitably go into the next stage in a fraction or nanosecond as soon as you get an object into your mind, right? And then once you get the Vedana stage, then you see whether it is a repulsive or attractive object. But what we can do is we can stop in the next stage with the attachment or the clinging upadana stage. We can stop, we can train our mind at the stage of upadana. That means do not cling to the object. What do you think about Bhante? I have a second question actually. Bhante, you can explain this one also. When it comes to Sapta-Bojjhanga, Preeti and Upeksha Bojjhanga, can it happen concurrently? Because the Preeti is different condition and upeksha is different conditions. But some people actually, some teachers, instead of upeksha, they explain that stage as tatra manjitava. Have you come across that one also?
Yes, yes. It is. So the first one,
Yeah.
we cannot stop, which is when a stream and when an object, what Damsiri is referring to is effectively cognitive streams. In the flow of cognitive stream, when passa arises, cognitively it will go through a stream of coming to results. But what we can essentially then do is to cultivate the mind in a certain way where now the mind is not hindered by a regressive thought that would then curtail the development of the practice. This in the Majjhima Nikaya 16th Sutta, it talks about Chetaso Vinibandha, the, the four shackles of mind, right? The four shackles of mind. And one of those shackles again is, of course, sloth and torpor that is there, but restlessness is also one of the four vinibandhas, which creates an element where the passa or the object which is taken through by the passa is then processed in a way that it creates great attachment, right? So that is from the stream of cognition or chitta viti. It does not stop. From the area of Patijasampada too, it cannot stop. Passa will arise. And when passa does arise, it will go through a stage. What did Mindasara Hamdru say, Damsiri, that day? I can't remember. Remember?
Yeah, I think
He said.
he said the same thing. You can't stop it, but the clinging is the part that we can stop. Yeah.
The clinging is a part because it also mentions that passa is a bipartisan of experience through consciousness. Just
Yeah.
like passa, just like Vedana Sanya. Should there be no Sanya, there is no consciousness. Should there be no Vedana, there is no consciousness. And with that same, should there be no passa, there is no consciousness.
Yeah. So this is where we are starting the practicing to reach that level, Bhante. But there is a level of Passaniro, the practices. We start the Indriya Bhavana practices, concentrating on the Passa, seeing as seeing. And we go from the eye to the ear base and watch all the object and the eye arising as seeing arise, and then the object disappears as only a seeing arise. We used to look at the cushions, a purple cushion, and then see it as a round purple object. We have to keep on doing this million times, many years we have to practice to come there. And there are stages called Passa Nirodho, not only Passa Nirodho, there are stages where you go to Salayatana Nirodho, even more difficult. So there are teachers who guide us to practice Vipassana. So you can talk about it, analyze it, and say you can't do it because it is like this, it's in a chart, you can't take it away, then your mind has gone here, there. But it is the path to realizations, to Maggaphala stages. And in Titakshana moments, you can reach those Maggaphala stages by these Passa Nirodho, and the Anagami person practices the Salayatana Nirodho practices, which I was talking to you the other day for Kamatahan for that. So teachers who do practice, like Birbal Dhammajiva and lots of other teachers, give you Kamatahan to achieve those. So unless you actually practice and experience that, there's no point in talking about it, saying it wasn't in that chart in Abhidhamma, it doesn't match with this area or that area of theory. But if you really sit down and meditate, you will experience it, what we are talking about.
Yeah, I think one of those anomalies is, for example, um, like the the samapatti,
Yeah.
which is an anomaly on its own compared to the normal way the consciousness operates. And I think in the Buddha's path of practice, the premise by which he teaches the cognitive processes in Chittaviti is with the premise of a normal mundane human being also, which then sort of this Vipassana practice, I mean, that is where it becomes supremely more excellent and unparalleled to any other teaching, because the letting go aspect is profound, so profound to an extent where it defies the samsaric chakra itself. So I think as Shiroma said, because yes, when we go to the transcendental practices of the Paticcasamuppada, the transcendental practices takes us essentially through each and every part of Nirodha, going into with respect to each and every aspect of the 12 parts of the Paticcasamuppada, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So yes. So I think, Damsiri, with regards to that specific thing, the premise is for an ordinary being. For example, it is like 5 chittavitis have to run. I'm sorry, 6, 5 to 7, 5 to 6 chittavitis have to run for a mundane person, but the Buddha can do it between 3 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
It is an anomaly.
Yeah.
And then we imagine through the normal context of the cognitive process. The first takes an image, the second takes a name, the third takes the light, the fourth takes, it has the 5 stages, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does the Buddha properly comprehend? And it says the Buddha knows far more deeply and far more intensely than any other mundane human being. And that is then an anomaly on its own, because he only has 3 chittavitis.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think having that sense of putting the practice ahead would then sort of be, because we start to discover so many sort of anomalies, because we're discussing something in Vipassana, because Vipassana which then defies all odds in a way.
Yeah.
Can I also add the sutra for you to read? Is the Madhupindika Sutra, very beautiful but simple sutta, where in three passages the Buddha explains how a normal mundane person's mind actually works, the worldly human beings, and what is happens, the cause and effect, and how Arya person has to practice to reverse that process. So in 3 passages, Madhupindika Sutra, then there is the Chula beautifully.
All right. Continue.
Bhante, regarding question number 2,
What is go again, please?
The Priti Bojjhanga and Upeksha Bojjhanga, can it happens concurrently?
Oh, hold on, I'm just writing something on experience. Yeah, with regards to that,
Yeah.
when we talk about Preeti, Preeti Sambodjhanga and Upekha Sambodjhanga, it can happen concurrently. It can, right?
Okay.
Because Damsiri, we are
Yeah.
not speaking here in this tense. Whilst it is Preeti, remember, it is also changing the way the mind operates from its foundation. One can be equanimous and be happy. It is almost as if saying one can enjoy without attachment.
Okay. Yeah.
It can happen.
Mhm.
Also, this piti is different to the piti that we will experience.
Mhm.
Right? This piti it is subtle to a great extent. Just imagine something like, again, I use that sort of, you can have beautiful fragrant roses and you can have beautiful fragrant jasmines in the same room. It'll mix to create another sort of tone of fragrance which can be beautiful, right? In the same way it can exist together, Damsika,
Yeah.
right? The thing with the question, where it comes to question, is where we compare this experience to jhana. That is where it can't happen,
Okay. Yeah.
right? That is where, but the thing is, states of this sort, are not jhana, they're vipassana.
Yeah.
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 The jhana, I mean, jhana is the jhana is child's play compared to what we are talking here today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is child's play. We are essentially talking about how we are going to balance, something on a needle, almost.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
this preeti is actually some sort of incentive feeling to continue your process, right?
no. What's the word that you used again?
Uh, incentive. Incentive.
Incentive, yes. Continuing, no.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Incentive, now that will come, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It says the attribute of a person, a practitioner, thinking I need to do this, is now reduces. It is actually a hindrance.
Yeah. Okay.
And a strong person, a practitioner who is truly enriched by the teachings and by the true sort of sense of vipassana, he is not bothered about this rat race.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It is a state of being.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Bhante. Mm.
All right. Shall we?
But the Anantarika Samadhi, the enlightened being's experience is a huge happiness with Samadhi.
Yeah.
Like the equanimity and huge happiness, isn't it? It's called Anantarika Samadhi, but it's overpowering happiness of enlightened beings in that state of calmness. Yes.
අනිත් එක බුදුහාමුදුරු කියන්නේ ආනන්දය යම් කිසි පුද්ගලයෙක් තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් මම මේ ජීවත් වෙන සැපය නේද? බුදුහාමුදුරු The Buddha says, Ananda,
Yeah.
if someone understands the bliss that I am living with, the happiness that I'm living with, this person will not choose to live with these hina, laukika pleasures. He will let go at that very moment, Ananda. You know, the Buddha is hinting at this nibbanic bliss that the Buddha is living in, this state of continuous high of absolute ecstasy and happiness, right? It is not a state of, it is not a state which is dull or boring in any way. You know, I mean, just imagine after a good metta session, you know, just the amount of the tingling sensations, just the aura of the mind. And then sort of that is after 1 hour or 30 minutes of metta. Just imagine the Buddha, you know, with Maha Karuna, what kind of pleasure he must be living in. You know what I mean? You know, what kind of pleasure he must be living in. Absolutely mad, isn't it? You know, I mean, mad in a good way. All right, shall we finish this so that I can go to sleep, please?
We'll finish it.
No, we just have 2 pages more. Yeah, is it okay? Can we go on?
Yeah, we can finish it.
Eh? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, Bante, yeah.
Eh?
Yeah, we've got some stanzas to tell you to finish.
No, we had 2 pages more. Hold on.
Oh no, I thought we were finishing.
Eva කොහොමද? Stanzas. Okay, hold on. Yeah, okay. Now we've covered, right? Having covered then that virya aspect, right? We go on to inspired by Bahya, inspired by the ability of a person to look objectively towards the elements that arise with everything that we have been discussing, right? Empowered, we go on to a state just as the Pitidam Siri, effort becomes, rather than an effort, it is an effort of non-effort. However, the effort exists, but the effort is primarily a condition, not a condition, but it is a state that is within the wholesome mind leading towards that enlightenment, right? The effort can't do this alone. The effort only has its power to be this way is because of the mindfulness, is because of the mindfulness, it's because of the Dhammavichaya, it's because of the Sati, Dhammavichaya, and the effort acting together. Without that, effort cannot be effort which is non-effort, in a way that it is non-effort, right? That is the linkage that we must try to build in our practice, right? That is the linkage. What we would then understand, or what the Tripitaka then instigates, is that we have to find ways that we integrate with the other parts of the Dhamma. දැන් අපි දාන දෙනවා, අපි හිතන්නේ මම මේක කොහොමද තව පොඩ්ඩක් ප්‍රඥාව මේකට වැඩි කරන්න කියන එක. right? අපි කුසල වර්ධනය කරගන්න, අපි කුසල චේතනාවක් වර්ධනය කරගන්න හිතනවා, ඒ ප්‍රඥාව ගැන හිතන්නේ. අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ ප්‍රඥාවයි කුසලයි එකට කොහොමද ගන්න කියන එක. ඒ ආකාරයටම in the same manner, we have to think about how we amalgamate, bring together sati, dhammavichaya and virya, and sometimes zest, right? That is when it really becomes going with the flow, right? Going with the flow, right? There is no fighting at this stage. There is no fighting. There is no prompting or hinting at restraint. The mind is inspired by the beautiful fragrance and aura of that goodness that we are developing. You know, now, for example, I mean, a very, very petty example I could use is, if I am to throw, let's say, a piece of food that I was hoping to eat falls into the bin, I will not I mean, my mind will not think about picking it up from the bin. I'm sure none of yours would as well, right? I mean, it's done. It's like it's gone to a place of no return, right? That consciousness does not arise, right? Almost so, there is no fight. I'm not going to be pondering, should I pick it up? You know, does a 3-second rule apply when it's in the garbage bin? No, 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 it doesn't apply. It doesn't happen. Almost so, that consciousness does not arise. That consciousness does not arise. And that is what the Sapta-Bojjhanga hints at. When they operate together, it gives us this operative way of living, which is in a gradual flow, harmonized and balanced by the active, by sati and the other Sapta-Bojjhangas together. Right? Now, how does the mind, now that is what Leena Chitta is, right? Then the question is, how does the mind become stuck? Right? There is this beautiful, I mean, it's not beautiful, but there is this saying, I can't remember, it is within the Thera Theri Gatha somewhere, right? Or in the commentaries. It says, the day the Sasana started, or the downfall of the Sasana began, is the day that monks started lying down. Right? There was a time of practice where monks would sleep on, right? Where monks would sleep on wood, right? Wood, hard floors, and they would not even lie down most of the time. They would sleep in sitting postures, right? This was a usual practice because anyways they were by the root of the trees, no? Right? Meditating. They would sleep like that as well. It is only later on that monks now started to sort of, get pillows and, all of these things, right? They say that is the day that the sasana started to, or the sangha started to depreciate. Why? Giving into the pleasure. When we talk about the word midda relates to sleep, right? To sleep. Now, this is like that piece of sugar you see, right? Seeni poddak kæවට පස්සේ තව කන්න හිතෙනවා, right? In the same way, when we give into the pleasure of this lax sleep midda, right? Our mind starts craving this sense of, or rather, our minds grow comfortable in that place or with that sense, right? With that sense. And that is what in the Majjhima Nikaya commentary, right, Midda is referred to as sleep, right? This is in the Nidda of the Majjhima Nikaya, second sutta, right? The Theragatha add, right, the Niddesa of the Majjhima Nikaya, second sutta. The Theragathas add stories of monks who did not sleep and all of these things, right? So the Aggi Sutta, which is the Bojjhanga, when it goes on to this sense of Leena, it has a deep connection with the comfort one derives out of non-action, out of non-doing, which is not a wholesome state, it is an unwholesome state. It's like, for example, the pleasure of Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, if you're not doing anything at all, and if you had a busy week, you're like, oh, I love not doing anything. I can't. But then, of course, we end up doing so much more, but still, even that thought you see, not doing anything, not having to open the computer, right? Pleasure that I don't have. But still, right, that thought, when we grow comfortable with that thought, we have that tentative nature to want that within our practice as well. And that is what Middha referred to. Tina Middha. It's referring to that sense of sleep, right? That sense of sleep. So from the sense of Stinamida, then we shouldn't take it literally to say that it is only sleep. It is everything that sleep represents. It is everything that prompts us to increase the time of sleep. It is everything represented by the fact of you being in bed early in the morning and thinking, oh, I wish I had another hour. It is not the act, it is what it represents and the attachment the mind has to that state. It's not the sugar, it's not the fat, it's not the meat, it's what it represents to the mind. And what it represents is that sense of indulgence, isn't it? Here, what it represents is the attachment to that sense of sluggishness, the laziness, mid. That is why, so what is the whole hassle of sleeping one more hour? There is no hassle. The thing is, the mind starts now thinking in that manner, where now it grows roots into the rest of your practice as well. That is what the Bojjhanga Sutta explains as middha, which is a way, a predominant, and actually mentioned as the only way that the mind becomes stuck. Think about that. Let's think about that for a moment. The mind is stuck. Lina, chitta. The only way out of that is through the active processes with zest, reminding us that the action that I am about to do to get myself out of this now with zest is worth it. To pull ourselves out of that mental, does it make sense? For me, it does. Right? It is what that sense represents. Yeah. And that is what within the commentaries, within the Majjhima Nikaya, within this sutta that we are doing, which is the Bojjhanga, the Aggi Sutta, the Bojjhanga Aggi Sutta, what it says, Thinamidda is, it speaks about the qualities of sleep. Does that make sense? Do you think it applies in every way?
What do you think? Yeah, it makes sense, Bhante.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Yes.
Did you all have dinner?
අපිද? අපිගෙන් දහන්නේ?
No.
We don't have dinner. අනික් අයගෙන් අහන්න ඕනේ.
I'm not asking you, I'm asking Damsiri Mala. They were hoping to get out of here in 1.5 hours.
Not yet, Bhante, not yet.
Who are attending without their partners, their marriages are, their partners have had to give up on them. I have taken their lives over, All right, let's continue. It's just a little bit. All right. Then we come to Uddata Chitta, right? Uddata Chitta, which is the restless mind. When during meditation, the mind becomes restless, Uddata, right? Which is essentially Uddacha Kukucha, relating to the past and the future, right? Again, here, we do not apply Dhamma investigation, the first triad, right? What we apply is the restraining factors in the similar restless mind, as we spoke of earlier, restless mind, active does not go together. Restless mind, restraining factors go together. We cannot add fire to a fire and hope that the fire will die away. We have to put water into it. The water is the inspirational resource, the inspirational knowledge, the inspirational experience of the water puts the fire out. That is then the last four. That is what we use. That is what we use when it comes to a restless state of mind, right? But do not assume that this has a lot of doing into it. It is a state of being with the results that quenches the fire. Not essentially in applying something in an inauthentic manner. It is really then going into, for example, again, the same example, you're mad with anger, emotions have taken over. What do? You sit yourself, you take a deep breath in, calm yourself. It's not the breathing that relaxes you. It is that experience and what the motion of that breath brings that relaxes the person. That should give you then an insight into what this application is talking about. It is not bringing to light the qualities of zest, the qualities of passaddhi and the rest. It is a quality of being able to be with the results. Example, we have these citronella candles, right? If you have mosquitoes or some sort of flies or something, you just light a citronella candle and you leave it somewhere. You can light it because you have it at home. You don't have to light the citronella candle and go behind the mosquito, no. You light that. Then you become the mosquito to the mosquito. Right? You light it and you leave it. That is essentially what we do with this. You be with the results, right? You be with the result. The blanket only works if you put it over yourself and just leave it there. That is the only way the blanket works. The blanket is, you can use, and this is my robe, but if I take it as a blanket, but you can use the blanket because you have a blanket. You've bought a blanket. You have it with you. But the only way it works is if you just leave it there. In the same way, you be with the fruit that you have reaped. That is what is the way which is spoken of here. Is that understood? Right? When we talk about stilling the restless mind, we begin with the first, which is passaddhi. Isn't it? The first is passaddhi on the passive section, right? Yes, it is. Right? Passaddhi.
Yeah. Passaddhi, calm. Passaddhi.
When we talk about passaddhi, right, if we go into it more fully, now passaddhi, we know it refers to first kaya passaddhi or bodily tranquility, right? Bodily tranquility, which now Buddha Gosa divides tranquility and speaks about it in three ways, right? Or refers to tranquility or kaya passaddhi, not three ways, I'm sorry. He refers to kaya passaddhi through three aggregates, through mental aggregates, which is Vedana, perception and formations. Sensations, feeling, perceptions and formations. Which goes on to think about that for a minute. Think about that for a minute. What, Shiroma?
මේ රූපේ නැද්ද කියලා බැලුවේ.
Yes. Kaya
කාය පස්සද්ධිය මෙතන මේ සභාවෙන් ප්‍රශ්නයක්.
Yeah.
කාය පස්සද්ධිය වෙනකොට වේදනා චිත්ත පස්සද්ධි කාය පස්සද්ධි තුනක් නේද බන්තේ තියෙන්නේ එතන.
I'll come to that. Now, Sutra ක්‍රමයේ අනුව හරි අපි ගත්තම දැන් කාය විවේක, for example, let's take කාය විවේක. Kāya Viveka arises through, according to the sutras, through 3 positions. Mokadda? Sunya Aranyagatova, Rukkumulagatova, Aranyagatova, Sunyagaragatova. Right? People understand that, right? Inoka? Yeah? Okay. Inoka's having a small break. Okay. So
No, I'm listening.
Good. So Kāya Viveka could arise with those 3, right? Those 3, but it is not really about, again, it is not really about the location. Of course, it is the aspect that the location creates for you. The sense of release from everything else, the sense of emptiness from everything else, the sense of promoting contemplation, which allows the mind to now be affected through Kāya Viveka. It says Kāya Viveke, Chitta Viveke Hataganama. Right? Here, when we say Kāya Passaddhi, Kāya Passaddhi would be brought about, or it would allow for, or that result which would be created is a manifestation of 3 mental attributes. Because, I mean, yeah, the body, regardless of what the body experiences, that's the body, you know. That is internally, it comes in through the mind. Right? It comes in through the mind, which is then feeling.
Yeah, the nama creates the manifest the rupa.
Exactly. This is talking about the manifestation, right? This talks about the manifestation, right? This talks about the manifestation. In another. This means that we do not have any more sense reactions, assuming we have cultivated the first 4 awakening factors of mindfulness. That is what, Shiroma, you were talking about. With the Indriya Bhavana.
Right. Yeah.
Where we then do not experience a reaction or a specific element of attachment towards anything, because of the fact, owing to the fact that we have developed the first 4 awakening factors: mindfulness, Dhammavichaya, effort, and zest, right? So we are no longer, is that understood, everyone else? Right? So we are no more distracted by senses, sense experience. Distracted, not that we don't experience it, not that we don't enjoy it, or we don't see beauty in it. We are not distracted by it. Who is distracted? A person who is distracted is a person, you can only be distracted from one thing, from Nibbana. So now you can eat that bag of chips, you can have that thing that you want, or go wherever you want. Now you can do all of that without a sense of distraction. That comes when all those 4 start operating together. That is brought about by feeling, perception, formations. Guarding these 3, or how the first 4 active, right, with zest. Here zest is included, right? Active.
Yeah.
Active.
Yeah.
In how the feelings, perception, and formations are conduced by the mind, right? Are conduced by the mind. Is that clear? Right? With mindfulness, when we have carefully investigated these states, mental states, with the right effort, which arouse a sense of zest. Zest is also called joyful interest. Now that's a beautiful way. joyful interest, zest. It is not raveling or ravishing in a sense of mental high or mental happiness. It is a sense of being within the present and having a joyful nature of inquisitive, or rather interest, not inquisitive, interest.
Yeah.
In that which is arising, or that which would arise, not that it is looking forward to anything as well, because it's okay without anything. It is okay without anything because it has something. What does it have? It has joy in it. It has joy in it. And from zest, now from that zest comes that tranquility. For the person who does not have anything, he craves for something. For the person who now has something, is happy with it. That sense. Do you relate to that sentence? Mm? And with all of the functions of the body, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, all of this, now we do all of that with, and we work fully with the mind only. Meaning, we do not relate our happiness, our suffering to those of the external worlds. It is now internal. Never give that band tune.
පන්තේ මේ ධම්මජීව හාමුදුරුවෝ කියනවා ලබු ගෙඩිය ඇතුලේ තොইলය කියලා. එළියේ නෙමෙයි කොම ඉන්ටර්නල් හින්දා.
Oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, no. Okay. So, because it is now labugedi athule toile, right? Because it is so, it does not. Because it is so, the mind is undistracted. The mind does not care. Not that it doesn't care. It is not engorged, or it doesn't, or it isn't anymore conditioned by the environment, but rather it is about what is internal than that, and that which is present internally, right? Which is present internally. Now, then we reach Upekka, right? Now, all of this, before we go to Upekka, all of this, right? All of this, when that pasad, that calm arises, that is now the perfect place for samadhi to arise. Why? The distractions are no longer there. The distractions are no longer there. The distractions disappeared. Why? Because of the elements of zest. The zest disappeared. Why? Because Dhammavichaya and Virya work together. I think, it is clear, isn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to that moment of practice now, I think, you know, for sure we are of higher ground to approach the subject, or to approach whatever arises in our minds much more better in a way, because we understand the mechanisms that are in play with regards to how nirvana, or how a mind would then welcome nirvana, right? And when that samadhi, the stillness appears, right? That stillness appears. If we take it from the perspective of, sorry, my jaw hurts. When we typical child, isn't it? So when that sense of, from a Chittanupassana perspective, for a person who is now observing or experiencing the stillness of mind, he experiences stillness in a way that is like a shiny, stable aura of light in the mind, not moving. The mind is not even inquisitive as to why it's not moving or why it's not changing. It is just in perfect bliss. It is there and it is visible. In a way that this mind itself can be observed in perfect stability, calm, bliss, in the present, unhindered by anything. And it glows in all directions as well, because at this moment, the mind is very strong. The mind is very strong. It is with this sort of a mind, it is with this sort of a samadhi that the Buddha gets up in the morning and radiates his Maha Karuna towards the whole world. Because it is in no way or by no means distracted in any way. When we have reached that state of calming tranquility, now is the right time for upekkha to arise as a result. When the mind is unperturbed by any of these external factors, when the mind is now instilled by the internal Bojjhangas that we have been able to cultivate, now arises the state of equanimity, upekkha. Brilliant, radiant, and joyful. With this state, we can go into any jhana quite easily. මේ මොහොතේ ඇත්තටම ධානයකට යන එක කිසිම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. You can go very quickly into jhana because your mind is already stable. It can take anything. It can memorize anything. It can bear anything in mind. Why? Because of that sheer sense of awareness, being, samadhi. That is where upekkha arises. The mind is neither asleep nor awake. It is in a state of perfect harmony with you and everything around you. It is in a state of utter connectedness in all aspects of being. It is a profound sense of beaming radiance of mind, and you have no questions, no thoughts, nothing in terms of further development that you want to see, because the mind is that calm and within that state of equanimity, right? Now, the last part, how does the mind become restless, right? It says, both learners and serious practitioners can experience restlessness through excessive striving. I have highlighted this in red, right? Through excessive striving, as mentioned in such discourses as the Pamsudovaka. We did related to this sutra early in the sutra class, Pamsudovaka Sutta, which compares a restless practitioner to when a goldsmith keeps on blowing fire to the gold, unaware, just restless, doesn't observe what's happening to the gold or whether he has crossed the line. He ends up burning the gold. Another example that we spoke about, and a popular example, right? Blowing fire. As a result, this is as a result of that example, right? We need to not be extreme in our practice of incorporating mindfulness and Buddhism into our daily lives. We need to understand. People say middle path, but we know that the middle path doesn't really mean that. What we need to realize is finding that balance. What you can do. I am not comparing, I'm not competing with anyone. You shouldn't. The only person who's trying to attain enlightenment from your perspective is you, no one else. Right? Because when you are goal driven in the practice, it becomes a hindrance, especially to the meditation. Right? Itin mean ara niman yanna thina ada hadisiya, to a person who actually knows the Dhamma, he will not have this sort of niman yanna thina hadisiya, you know, because he understands, not because we don't want to attain it, he understands that that is not the way. He understands that this is a state of being. It is a state of becoming through these profound stages of cultivation, not by anything else. Then we have the Iddhipada Vibhanga Sutta, which clearly says that when desire for progress on the path becomes excessive, Ati Paggahita Chanda, which is called Ati Paggahita Chanda, it will give rise to restlessness, right? As long as there is restlessness, notes the Chakka Arahatta Sutta, it is impossible, it says impossible to reach the final goal. Sorry. Moderate effort is famously pointed out by the parable of the lute, remember? Which is, you have to tune it right. You can't make the string too tight, neither too loose. Tight or hard doesn't essentially mean good. Balance is good. And another thing it points out in the Patala Sutta is the speech, right? You have to be able to shut that yap and do what you have to do. Right? You're pointing. Shilpa is pointing.
Good advice. I said it's good advice, Bhante.
Yeah. In the Patala Sutta, it says, harsh speech, provocative words, and mindless speech creates restlessness in the practitioner. Hence, owing to this wrong types of speech, a lot of arguments arise in one's life. දැන් ඉතින් මොඩ දෙයක් කිව්වට පස්සේ ආපහු ඒක නෑ නෑ මම මේකයි කිව්වේ කියලා තේරුම් කරන්න නැත්තේ නේද? You know, මම මේ කතා කරන්නේ මේ හේතුව හින්දා. You know, I'm breaking my noble silence because so better you just don't break it. In the first place. Right? And it says that prevents more mental concentration because the restlessness arises, and it also continues to defile the mind with unnecessary thought. Anavashya vitarka. While a monastic receives, now it also claims, now here it also refers to the monastics. Restlessness can also arise in connection with alms collecting. As when a monastic receives nothing because people are too busy to notice that someone has come, an unmindful monastic might become restless and wonder who has caused a rift between them and their supporters. Right? Them and their supporters. Right? That is the end. That is the end. You know, so my approach, my takeaways, or what I'm suggesting is focus on the indriyas, look at what causes restlessness and sloth, torpor, midda in one's life. And think about applying or bringing together Dhammavicaya and Virya in a way that you are clearly attentive of these hindrances that are stagnant. And if one then propagate or work with the Indriyas proper, you will be able to now get rid of or work one's way into higher states of mind.
So Bhante, that this whole development of the Bojjhangas is for the purpose of realizing and understanding the Four Noble Truths, the Chaturarya here. Could you throw some light onto that? How, with your in-depth wisdom, how you see that? Please.
All right. I mean, I don't know about in-depth wisdom, but I think the Chaturarya Satya Dharma, I think the Chaturarya Satya Dharma is just in another way. These parts that we have spoken of is part and parcel of experiencing that path that we have read, that is shown by the Chaturarya Satya Dharma.
Yeah.
And I think the Indriyas and the Sapta-Bojjhangas, the Indriyas, now if we take the Indriyas apply more to the first noble truth. Whilst the Chaturarya Satya Dharmas, actually the Indriyas would relate to all, but it seems more predominant within the first noble truth. And then the Sapta-Bojjhanga, the Indriyas leading to the Sapta-Bojjhanga becomes more of a path of progress from the first to the last.
Right. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, very good. It shows like a picture now. Now, obviously, at the end is, of course, after the Upekka Bojjhanga, then there is Cheto Vimutti, and that's the end, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cheto Vimutti after that.
Yeah. Sapta-Bojjhanga hatama Indriya bala, Indriya taking support vela, where when the Indriya support the Sapta-Bojjhanga, and with that support, the Sapta-Bojjhanga becomes more and more pure, you go into the high states of mind, a loving for the subtle, fine letting go, which allows for the viraga.
Yeah.
Viraga, Arupa viraga, උතකට එන්නේ මේ සප්තබොජ්ජංග හත දැන් වැඩ කරන්න පටන් ගත්තා.
Viraga, it's got අනිත්‍යක නේද? Nibbida, Nirodha, Patinissagga, all follows to Nibbana, and that completes it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Bhante.
Yeah, makes sense. I didn't waste 3 hours of your time.
Thank you.
3 hours 25. Okay. අනේ මේ ගාථා කියන්න ඕනේ නැහැ, මං යනවා යන්න. ගාථා කියන්න එපා මං යන්න.
නෑ මම අපි කියනවා Bhante. මේක නෙමෙයි.
මට ලැජ්ජයි මං යන්න.
You have it. You have it. You have to. We want, give us that pleasure of doing that, please. Bhante. Okay. Okay.
Hari.
Okay.
Hari.
Okasa Vandami Bhante.
Okasa Vandami Bhante.
හරිනේ කියන්නේ.
Bhante. ඉතින් නැහැ. Bhante කියන්න ඕනේ සුඛී හොන්තු කියලා. අබේ ශ්‍රියානි has sent you a copy for the phone.
I know it. Okay, you go on then. Hari.
Okay. Okasa Vandami Bhante.
කිව්ව සුඛී හොතු කියලා. කියන්න දැන්.
අපිට ඇහුන්නේ. හරි. මයා කතා පුඤ්ඤං සාමිනා අනුමෝදිතබ්බං.
සාදු අනුමෝදාමි.
සාමිනා කතා පුඤ්ඤං මයං දාතබ්බං.
අනුමෝදත.
සාදු සාදු අනුමෝදාමි. කසද්වාරත්‍යේන කතං සබ්බං අච්චය කමමේ බන්තේ.
අමාමි කමතබ්බං.
Okasa kamami bhante, yampi okasa kamami bhante, tatyampi okasa kamami bhante.
Hari mං හිතුවා මේ මොදි බන්දනා ගාථා කියන්න යනවා කියලා. හරි.
is our gratitude to you, Bhante. We had 3 hours of a beautiful Dhamma session, and it's really practically very important to us and effective, and we will discuss it further as well. So all the sessions have been very good, and yesterday we actually listened to a Dhamma talk on all the sessions you did as well. So හොඳ කුසල් සේරම අනුමෝදන් වෙත්වා කියලා ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා. සියලු බාධක අහෝසි වෙලා සියලුම බාධක අහෝසි වෙලා නිවන් සුවයම ලැබේවා කියලා ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.
All the very best with all of your practices. Is this the last day of the retreat? Is this the last day, Shiroma, of the retreat?
Tomorrow is the last day.
Oh, it's the last day. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
All right, then all the best. It's 10 o'clock for you. So
Good night.
yeah, good night, everyone. I'll put the recording up on the website.
Good night. Have a nice day.
Good one.
Bye. Good night, dear. Bye. Good night.